He's a designer, a creative director, and more recently, he's the founder and executive director of Islands of Brilliance. I won't spoil the story, I'll let him tell you more. But before that, he enjoyed a career in advertising for over a couple decades. You may have known some of his work, working with the likes of Translator, some firms in Minneapolis as well. And little known fact, he loves popcorn occasionally and breakfast mornings so here. What kind of fish? And prairie flowers. Without further ado, the one and only Mark Fairbanks.
I just want to say, I think, Creative Mornings Milwaukee is one of the greatest things in the city. This is just so cool. The energy level here, the diversity of people, the different disciplines, it's amazing. I think the importance of people getting together in person and having these conversations and discussing ideas is really cool. Did anybody go to the On the Table events last week? Yep, okay. Another great, initiative here. And I hope stuff like this continues to grow and move forward. So, let's talk. I kept bumping into this quote from Maslow the last 6 months. Probably because it was supposed to be the first slide in this deck, apparently. And because I'm a recovering art director, I cut off the first part of it. But the first part of the quote is, one must choose between going back and choosing to move forward. Very interesting thing, right? And then growth must be chosen again and again, and fear must be overcome again and again. What's interesting about that, how often do we think that growth and fear have a relationship, right? They actually meet for breakfast often. And so, hey fear, hey growth. But we don't think about that. We see fear and sometimes are stopped by it, but that's actually the conduit to growth. Now, I think that pioneers understand this. They understand that staying in the safety part, they can't do that. They have to move forward, right? And they move forward towards growth and new horizons. Now, part of that is, how do they actually navigate fear? And I think that's a really interesting thing to explore. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I kind of broke it down into these three threads. That we come up against fear, and we have to find a way around it so that it doesn't become this obstacle. The other thing is to act fearlessly, and I think part of that is to think unconventionally. So we've got a bunch of creative people here, right? So fearlessness is kind of in our blood. We understand that. And the last thing is fear as a motivational factor. So that's what we're going to talk about, those three things. So I'm going to start these. A lot of these are personal anecdotes, and I'll relate them, but to what this is. But this first one, there's going to be a little contest here. We're going to give out 2 more tickets. And there's no cheating, because you know the answer to this. Anybody know who this is? This character? Oh, boy. Very good. You get 2 tickets to our fundraiser, Colors and Chords, in 2 weeks at Turner Hall. Congratulations. Very good. Yeah. This is Gigantor. And I watched Gigantor when I was a kid. This is back in 1965, 66. I was into anime in 66. Pioneer, right? I was into anime before it was cool. Watched it. I grew up in Racine, Wisconsin, just like Paul. Watched it on Channel 9 out of Chicago. And it was about this time that I was in kindergarten, and they had like a costume day. And my mom says, "What do you want to go as this year?" I'm like, "I want to go as Gigantor." And she didn't say this, but the look on her face is like, "What the hell is Gigantor?" Because you couldn't go to, I don't know, what Zare back then and just buy a Gigantor costume. So she has to figure out how to make this. My mom's Sicilian, and I got, a lot of my creativity from her. So she, all detergent came in these cardboard canisters back then, about, I don't know, this tall. So she takes one of those, strips the branding off, cuts holes for my arm. Takes these, cardboard tubes from paper toweling to make the jet packs on the back, then wraps the entire thing in Reynolds wrap. Takes pants, my little army boots, a football helmet, takes the face guard off, spray paints it. So, like, this thing is great. I try it on, it fits great. All right. And I think it was the day before the costume event at school. I'm like, all right, what if people make fun of me? What if I could look really stupid and get picked on? And I don't know about this. So I think it's at breakfast, I tell my mom, I don't want to go as Gigantor anymore. I just want to go as a football player. And she squints her eyes and looks at me. And she says, you are going as Gigantor or you're going as a dead duck. All right? So I went as Gigantor. And I won the costume award and was brought from class to class, and all my friends, want to try this thing on. But think about that, because I bet a lot of people in here have a metaphorical Gigantor costume that you are afraid to get into, right? I don't know, a 30-second pitch, perhaps. Maybe. I can't leave my job to start this business because I don't know, I won't make a dime and then I'll starve and all these things. And, I want to take that class or I want to volunteer, but I don't know anybody there and that'll be weird and I'll just stay home and watch Netflix. So I think it's important to recognize fear for what it is, as this obstacle, and be able to work around that. Because on the other side, are all the growth benefits and things like that. Okay? So that's so we'll come back to that later. But second little anecdote here. Everybody knows this story, right? I was doing a storytelling workshop for a group of startups at, I think it was Generator a few years ago, and I did some research on storytelling. And it was interesting. The insight was the hallmark of a great story is in its ability to be retold over and over again by other people. That's what makes a good story, and everybody knows this. What's interesting is I came across, in doing research for the talk, a TED Talk by Malcolm Gladwell, where he talks about David and Goliath. He says this story is all wrong. We think about it as David is this underdog and he defeats, the giant. He says, actually, Goliath really didn't have a chance because David thought unconventionally. And because he thought unconventionally, that fueled his fearlessness, right? So he didn't need any armor, and he had a sling, and that was actually high technology back then, I guess. And Goliath was trapped literally and figuratively by his armor, by his conventional approach to battle. So Malcolm Gladwell's like, it's not surprising that David actually won. So that's, interesting point of view. So this feels like 3 lifetimes ago. I actually my first agency was Octane here in town, and actually Jen Kuhn is one of my former employees there, or colleagues, I really should say. And we were this great little firm in town, 9 people, I think. Did a lot of amazing work, won a lot of awards. But I think that the thing that sticks with me is how tight-knit we were. I've never worked with a group of people that was that tight-knit. And we were known for this kind of style of work that looked like found objects, okay? So this is a piece we did for the local chapter of the Salvation Army, hung above the kettle signs, right? And this got into one show advertising annual, got into communication arts advertising annual, all these awards and things. I think communication arts was December of 2003. So in January 2004, I come in and there's a voicemail. It's, hi Mark, this is Darren Irby. I'm the Vice President of Communications for the American Red Cross in Washington, D.C. going through communication arts and I saw your poster for Salvation Army. We've got an upcoming project I'd like to talk to you about. I'm like, bullshit. Because they were always playing practical jokes on me, like some irate customer, like, oh, well, this is another one of these. But he's got a, Washington, D.C. area code. I'm like, is this legit? So I call him, and it's legit. So in 2004, they were dedicating the World War II Memorial in Washington. And of course, with the Red Cross's involvement, during the World Wars, they wanted to have a big presence there. And they're looking for an agency to help them with what that experience was going to look like. So they asked us to submit a proposal, and everybody know what an RFP is, request for proposal? Okay. So from an agency perspective, you're going to put together your scope of work, you're going to put a budget in there, and then you might have some type of sample of what you're going to do. And generally, you package it in a way that stands out. It's not just this document. It should be cool looking, right? And we were good at that. But we took it to this other level. Because if you're going to do an RFP for the World War II Memorial for the American Red Cross, it should look like a GI footlocker from 1944. So we went to this, I don't know, it was a military out in West Dallas. I think it's still there, Dallas. And picked this out. And then when you opened it up, they wanted wearables and things like, and this was, actually Jen was the art director on this. Yay, Jen. Yeah. So the documents on this were meticulous. They looked like they were from 1944. I think we spent about 2 weeks on getting this ready, and then we shipped it off to Washington. And I think they got it, and we're like, who the hell are these people? And surprisingly, we didn't get the work. Did not get. However, we got a little bit of a consolation prize. And that was, they invited us to the review of the entire Red Cross account. So there were 14 agencies that they invited, big national firms, and this little 9-person shop out of Milwaukee. So I'm sitting on a conference call with all the agencies, and I had the mute button on, and they said, we don't want you to send the pitch teams, send the people who are going to work on the account. I'm like, you'd have to send the entire agency. So we did. We rented a van, a white Ford van, and we took 6, 7 people in it. Dad drove, I was the driver. Everybody in the van was like 27 years old or under. I mean, literally, we had a very young agency. And we left, we stopped in Cleveland, we donated blood, we videotaped the whole thing. Some of you know, yeah, except you, because you would have fainted. Dan Levine was our intern. Some of you know Dan, he was at MyEd. He videotaped and edited the thing along the way. We crashed a black tie ball in Cleveland that night. Some of our account directors went in and interviewed people. We got that on tape. And then we drove the rest of the way to Washington and sorted clothing in one of their shelters out there. And we edited this thing the night before, and we gave our little, whatever it was, 20-minute pitch, and then I told them the story about being on the conference call, and then we played this 9-minute video, and their jaws dropped, and then everybody walked in. We were one of 3 agencies that made the final. Wow. Hill Holliday, and I think McCann were the other ones. So these huge behemoth agencies, and then the little, 9-person shop in Milwaukee, okay? I don't remember the exact details, but I think for our final pitch, our idea was to use the Red Cross website and YouTube, which was kind of new at the time, to upload content from people who are on the ground. That's now called user-generated content. That wasn't even a term back then. And there wasn't Facebook and there wasn't Twitter. That was kind of like the major idea. So like, how did we even think about that? We had a great pitch. I think they loved it, and then 3 agonizing weeks go by. And of course, we did not get the account because I probably wouldn't be here right now given this particular story. We did get a great consolation prize, which was the 125th anniversary, which was about a $250,000 project that happened the following year. But you think about that in the terms of the David and Goliath narrative, that, a lot of the times David doesn't win. That does not stop you from doing this. And in an instance like this, it should drive your ability to think unconventionally and act unconventionally. Because unconventionality means fearlessness. Because if you're not stuck in what's safe, then there's really no fear, right? And the experience of that, and with those people and what it taught us all about ourselves, is really what's important and what lasts. And actually, if we did, okay, it's working. Had we won that account, I wouldn't be telling you this next story. So many of you are familiar. I know so many people here today that you've probably heard this story, but for those who haven't heard it, at the age of 3, my youngest son, Harry, was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And when we met with the neurologist, my wife Margaret and I, who's in the back there, the neurologist told us that he wouldn't be ready for first grade and don't plan on him going to college. Okay, he's not even 3 years old. So think about the fear you're going through as a parent, right? And think about the heartbreak. And then think about somebody telling you that. So your fear, you go from fear to anger. I think we know something about fear going to anger in the country right now. But in this instance, fear moving to anger meant motivation to prove them wrong. And all I remember saying was, he will be ready for first grade and will decide what he's capable of doing. So at that time, 3 years to today, he is 19 years old. He's a sophomore at UW-Milwaukee. Okay? Yeah. He actually made the dean's list his freshman year, 3.866, I don't know. Lower than his mother's GPA, but a lot higher than Dad's, okay? And what happened in between, this family story became Islands of Brilliance, which is this amazing community story, really. And, when I think about it, it's with the help of a lot of people here. We actually get way too much credit for it, but I'm just going to give you a very quick primer on autism and why this is important. How many people actually know someone on the spectrum or a family? All the time. It's like a lot. It's more than you think. This is the rate of prevalence, or the increase in it, from 1990, when it was 1 in 3,000, to the last figures taken were in 2014, where it's 1 in 68. It's actually estimated now 1 in 45, all right? That's 2% of the population between 3 and 17. In South Korea, apparently it's 3%. It's 1 in 36, I think Autism Speaks says. And that has an economic impact, which is calculated at $465 billion by 2025. I mean, this is significant. When I talk about fear as a motivator, what we've learned is the unemployment rate of adults on the spectrum, 90%. So every parent, this is in the back, this is what keeps you awake at night. What is a long-term likelihood of my son or daughter's independence and ability to be employed? So it started with our son. This is our motivating factor right now, is to change that figure, at least in our students who go through Islands of Brilliance, maybe in the greater Milwaukee community, but that is what is driving us. Fear as a motivator, right? Fear isn't always a bad thing. I want to show you some of the work we do. Very quickly, how the program works is student, one-on-one mentor. I actually have a bunch of mentors here in the crowd. Work together on a project. It's based around the student's area of interest. It's called area of affinity. So in this case, Aaron's love is M&Ms, among other things, SpongeBob. So we pair the two together. They work on professional level technology. They do a project. So this gets buy-in, right? If we base it on what they're interested in, they'll focus longer, they'll spend more time on it. They have a best friend who's helping them, and they're naturals at technology. So Aaron did this summer and did it in one class, 75 minutes. This is one show worthy. That's like work that comes out of New York or Austin, wherever your favorite agency is. He's 8 years old. Think about that. Barb Paulini worked with Alex Shaw on this. And, combine his favorite things, Legos and zombies, and let's make it look like Andy Warhol, so Lego Zombie Warhol. This has ended up in Milwaukee Magazine. It's available on inktothepeople.com. Very cool stuff. If you process information differently, you come up with different ideas, right? I gave this in the 30-second pitch I think in May. But Jonathan is into architecture, antiques, history, never touched Illustrator. Actually does really good, hand drawing. Like this is 0 to 60, taking a driver's lessons and then qualifying for the Indy 500. I mean, and that's not tracing, by the way. That's looking at a picture and doing it over here. And then there's just fun stuff like Kim. We call these Kim's Kimians. Pages and pages and pages and pages of this stuff. Wonderful. The great Sir Ken Robinson in his TED Talk, talks about creativity should be regarded in the same light as literacy. And if our students struggle in traditional classrooms, we're giving them an environment where they can be fluent in creativity and divergent thinking and the skills and the strengths that we're good at. So we're all about capabilities and not disability. So none of this is even remotely possible without the people who are involved in this. And if you look at this, I'm honored to be here speaking on Pioneer because I work with pioneers. We have kids who act fearlessly, who think differently, who approach solutions and they aren't afraid of making mistakes. They work joyfully. We have our volunteers who may have anxiety about, working one-on-one with a student, especially a student on the spectrum, but they're bigger than big and stronger than strong. They're not afraid to put on the Gigantor costume and help these kids. So we've got fear as a motivator, we've got fearless students, and we've got volunteers who can compartmentalize fear and get around it to help. So in the last 5 years, this is what happened. It's really interesting. Sunday is the 5-year anniversary of when we started this with 7 students. As a test. This is wrong. Again, art director and me, it's 230, but that would have gone off the screen, and I just don't want to do that. So this thing is growing, but what's really exciting is the next 5 years. We want to have a dedicated space. We want employment opportunities, not just for children, for our students who can work in design and coding and 3D modeling and engineering, things like that. But also, is there a coffee shop in there where people can just hang out with good Wi-Fi? The community comes in. We want a 2-year digital academy. We're planning on 2019 for that to happen, where junior and seniors can go through that as part of their regular education curriculum, come spend a day with us and build these skills with more rigor. So that's what's on the horizon. We're very excited about the next 5 years as well. So, and just to wrap this up, the reason I wanted to talk about fear is its prevalence in our daily life. It's like a plague. If I took out my phone and looked at Google, what would be trending? Fear. Hashtag fear. But if we do believe that quote, that fear is actually the opportunity for growth, then we are living in a tremendous time right now. Because as you can tell from me, I will flip that narrative and change it. Because the more fear there is, the more opportunity for growth there is. What we have to do is think and act intentionally and not reactively. Oh my God, I couldn't have scripted that any better. Thank you for that. So, can we use this fear as a motivator? We've seen that, right? People are starting to take action. As this group in here especially, how do we think unconventionally and act unconventionally? Fearlessness. I think that's in our DNA in here, right? And we have a role to play in this. And then, if fear is that obstacle, how do we address it for what it is and say, no, there's something better on the other side. How do we get around it? So all of us have an opportunity to be pioneers. We have an opportunity to be citizens. I think that's a calling. We've gotten away from that. We're really good consumers. We need to be better citizens again. So, next time fear is standing in your way, just remember to address it, because otherwise you'll be a dead duck. Thank you.
Mark Fairbanks! Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
We're going to jump into a quick Q&A, maybe confronting some of your fears or questions you have on the subject. So we're going to pass around a mic so everybody can hear us, and we'll just take maybe 5 minutes or so for a quick Q&A. Any questions for Mark here? Start it off. We have one in the back there.
Mark, do you have any plans for Islands of Brilliance to do satellites in schools or in maybe home care kind of situations?
Mm-hmm. Great question, and we've been asked that before. I think one of the key ingredients of what we're doing is that it doesn't happen in school, that it's that where we do it is in a design firm, right? And that opens up a lot of possibilities, because we're bringing students in who maybe don't ordinarily thrive in a traditional classroom environment, and bringing them into a really creative space and inspirational space. The other thing that does is the interaction between the student population and the professional population is really important, because it gets the professional population to see these students of what they're capable of. Now, to your point, I think the natural way to work with schools is we are working on what is the transition solution, because that's why that 90% is so high, that has not been figured out. So what we're doing is starting younger, right? We call it early intervention employment. So our kids are between the ages of 10 and 18, Aaron's 8, get them started earlier, learning skills, working with somebody so that they have a longer runway to development. So that 2-year digital academy is the ultimate, ending of this kind of talent development process, where within that, students coming out of it will be ready to go right into UWM or MIAT or MATC or MSOE, or start employment right off the bat. So we look at it as, I call it accelerated learning. I think school is great. Mar and I both do, but there needs to be learning that happens outside of school. for all kids.
Time for maybe just one more question.
Does your firm have opportunities for volunteers?
Oh my God, yes.
What do you need?
The biggest need is always this one-to-one mentorship, which is, if you know Photoshop, Illustrator, we're going to be expanding the workshops that we do offer. There are other opportunities just within our workshops to kind of assist in the periphery, but to give you an idea of how this program is growing, we usually run 3 workshops in fall. We opened it up to 4, so it's 32 students. The 3 workshops filled in a day, and the final class filled within a few days, and there's a waiting list. So we actually need to continue to expand the volunteer base to keep up with how many people are interested in the program. And we have, I think, 300 creatives on our email list, so we're still looking to kind of grow that. So there are a lot of different opportunities to get involved. So islandsofbrilliance.org.
And if you want, November 10th, right?
Yes, Colors and Chords at Turner Hall. And Dina Nord is one of the artists. So Colors and Chords is 4 bands, 4 artists on stage, live painting for a 30-minute set. Dina will be there. Collections of Colonies of Bees is one of the bands. And for the first year, we're opening with one of our students. 11-year-old Trinity Jackson is going to open the show for a 30-minute set with Jay Anderson, who's putting together like a little jazz duo or trio. And then we're also, Northwestern Mutual is sponsoring a Rockstar Welcome. So we're going to bring 20 to 25 student mentor teams up on stage to welcome and celebrate. And it's a big celebration. There is fundraising involved. We do get ways for you to part with money, but it's more celebration and it's a cool event. That's the end of my pitch.
One more round of applause for Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
And much love to our team as well. As I mentioned, it's been 3 years since Creative Mornings, and it certainly wouldn't be possible without an incredible team. Everybody who's been a part of the event, do you mind just coming up to the stage real quick? Just so you can see these faces and remember them and thank them, because all of them are incredible, and they made this possible. So, thank you guys. It's been so good working with you. And we look forward to many more memorable events to come. See you soon.